The moment his voice trembled, the whole room felt like it forgot how to breathe. Gary, Indiana, March 3rd, 1968. I had walked into countless rehearsals before, but that morning carried a temperature of its own, one that pressed against my skin like a warning I wasn't meant to understand yet. The wooden floor of our cramped rehearsal room creaked with every step, as if the boards themselves anticipated something unusual. The air smelled of dust, old varnish, and a faint metallic sharpness, almost like the seconds before a storm. Michael stood in the center of the room, small, focused, and burning with a concentration far too intense for a 9-year-old. I remember thinking he looked like a single bright flame in a room full of shadows. Even from behind, I could sense that something in him was shifting, like a wire pulled just slightly too tight. I didn't want to acknowledge that feeling. I just wanted us to get through rehearsal without any unpredictable surprises. But deep down, I already knew nothing about that day was going to be ordinary. Tito adjusted his guitar strap, Marlon tapped his foot anxiously, and Jermaine kept humming the harmony under his breath, trying to ground us all in some kind of rhythm. But no one, not even Michael, realized how fragile that rhythm truly was. We began as always, steady, controlled, demanding. Our voices layered over each other, chord after chord, until the room filled with the heat of our effort. But even while singing, I couldn't stop watching Michael. His voice carried a softness that morning, still beautiful, still precise, but different. I couldn't tell if it was fatigue, emotion, or something else entirely. Every time he reached a mid-range note, his brows furrowed just slightly, and his shoulders tightened as if he were bracing for impact. Inside me, worry began coiling like smoke. Don't overthink it, I told myself, but my instincts kept whispering that something was coming. We moved through the verses, the harmonies tightening, the tempo building. The sun outside had begun sinking behind the rooftops, turning our rehearsal room into a dim chamber painted in amber and shadow. It felt cinematic, almost unreal, as though someone had dimmed the lights for dramatic effect. I tried to focus on my cue, but my attention kept drifting back to Michael's breathing. Shorter, quicker, slightly uneven. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Something was wrong. Still, Michael raised his chin with that stubborn determination he had carried since the first day we performed together. He didn't want to disappoint us, none of us did, and so we kept pushing through the song, stepping deeper into the tension without realizing how close we were to the edge. As we approached the final chorus, the atmosphere grew strangely heavy, like the room was drawing in breath alongside us, waiting for the moment Michael would hit the note that always sent a chill through anyone listening. He closed his eyes as the music swelled around him, the way he always did when preparing for a challenging section. But this time his eyelashes trembled, and that trembling felt like a signal. My heart started pounding harder, syncing with an invisible ticking. The chorus rose. Tito strummed harder. Marlon's foot stopped tapping. Jermaine's hum cut off abruptly. Every element sharpened, and in that sharpening, everything slowed. Michael inhaled, a single breath, too deep, too fragile. Then he reached for the high note. Time fractured. The sound left his throat in a burst of brilliance, clear, piercing, haunting. It sliced through the room with such precision that my skin prickled. For an instant, it felt as if the very air froze. The walls, the instruments, even our pulses, all suspended in that one perfect, trembling sound. Then, all at once, the note buckled, not cracked, not faltered, buckled, as though something inside him had shifted out of alignment, pulling the ground right out from under his voice. Michael's mouth was still open, but no sound followed. His eyes snapped open, wide and searching. The brilliance that had filled the room vanished, replaced by a silence so abrupt and violent, it felt like the aftermath of an explosion. My stomach dropped. Jermaine took a step forward. Tito's guitar chord died mid-strum. Marlon froze like he'd been struck. And Michael just stood there, one hand lifting instinctively toward his throat, as if trying to catch the sound that had slipped away. I felt something twist inside my chest. It wasn't panic, not yet. It was a cold, paralyzing awareness that whatever had just happened wasn't a simple mistake or a missed note. It felt deeper, more unsettling, like a crack forming beneath the surface of something we depended on without question. I opened my mouth to call out his name, but the words tangled in my throat. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint rattle of the furnace in the corner, the hum of a distant car outside, even the quickening beat of my own pulse. Michael swallowed hard. His expression was unreadable, part confusion, part fear, part defiance. He tried to speak, or maybe sing, I couldn't tell. But the moment he attempted to form sound, nothing emerged. His lips trembled, barely parting, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any scream. Watching him struggle, a strange sensation washed over me, something sharp, protective, and terrifying. It was as though I was witnessing the exact second a delicate thread snapped, leaving us suspended without certainty, without direction. And yet no one moved, no one dared to speak. We were held captive by the quiet. That was the moment I realized the room hadn't just fallen silent, it had frozen. Because of one note, a single, brilliant, impossible note. The last one he managed before everything shifted. And though I couldn't have known it then, that frozen silence was only the beginning. The first fracture in a story that would grow darker, deeper, and far more complicated than any of us could imagine. The silence didn't fade, it thickened. It wrapped itself around us like a slow tightening ribbon, squeezing the air out of the room. My ears rang, not because of sound, but because of the sudden lack of it. Tito lowered his guitar, but the strap creaked loudly in the hush, almost accusatory. Jermaine's breath hitched. Marlon's sneakers scraped the floor as he shifted unconsciously, like a child trying not to wake something sleeping beneath the boards. And Michael stood so still he looked carved from the same wood as the stage beneath him. His hand remained pressed lightly against his throat, fingers trembling in a rhythm I'd never seen from him before. It was the trembling that got me, not the loss of the note, not the shocked stares of my brothers, but that tiny tremor, the kind that only shows when fear is blooming from the inside out. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully. "Mike?" I asked, but my whisper felt like it cracked the room in half. He didn't answer, his lips parted slightly as if testing the shape of sound before daring to release it. A breath escaped him, warm and thin, but nothing followed. No word, no hum, no whisper, just silence. And the moment that silence passed his lips, something inside me shifted. I had seen him tired, shy, angry, ecstatic, but never speechless, in a way that meant more than exhaustion, never in a way that felt like his own voice had slipped out of reach and wasn't sure how to return. He swallowed again. I could see the tension in his throat, see him fighting not to panic, see him desperately searching my face for reassurance I didn't know how to give. Behind us the door creaked open. I hardly noticed until the cold from the hallway brushed the back of my neck. One of the neighborhood kids poked his head in, curious about the sudden halt in music. The second he saw our expressions, especially Michael's, he backed out, closing the door gently, as though afraid a louder sound might shatter whatever brittle thing had entered the room. I approached Michael carefully, the way you approach a wild animal that doesn't want to be startled. "Take a breath," I murmured, slow, like we practiced after long sets. He obeyed, but the breath stuttered. Fear had gotten to him, real fear, the kind he wasn't used to dealing with. At 9 years old, his entire world was built around sound. Not just any sound, his sound. That voice was his heartbeat, his armor, his way into every room we weren't supposed to enter. Losing it, even for a moment, must have felt like losing the ground beneath his feet. Jermaine finally spoke. "Jackie, what do we do?" The question hung there, heavy. It sounded so simple, it felt impossible. I didn't know what to do, none of us did. But I couldn't let them see that, not when Michael was looking at me like my calm might be the only thing keeping him together. So I lied with my voice before I even formed the words. "It's okay," I said. His voice just pushed too far for a moment. "He needs a minute." But even as I said it, even as I forced my tone to stay level, my mind was racing. That note Michael hit, it wasn't just high, it was sharp in a way that bordered on dangerous, like a blade honed too finely. It rang with something alive, electric, unsteady. It had filled the room in a way that was almost unnatural for such a small boy. Then it collapsed. And the collapse felt wrong. "Mike," I said again, softer, "blink twice if you're all right." He blinked once, swallowed, blinked again. Relief washed over me, but only partially. He was conscious, aware, but not okay. Not really, not yet. I crouched slightly so our eyes aligned. His pupils were wide, fear widening them until the brown looked nearly black. He tried to speak again, tried to mouth something like, "I can," or "I'm fine," or maybe even, "Don't tell Dad." I couldn't be sure. But no sound followed. His frustration showed in a tiny shake of his head, almost invisible, but enough to break something inside me. This wasn't just a missed note, it was a moment cracking open, and inside that crack, something unsettling had taken root. A sudden draft swept through the room as Tito opened a window, trying to let in air. The cold sliced through the warmth, and Michael shivered. I reached out instinctively, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me, brows tightening, as if asking a question without words. What's happening to me? I didn't have the answer. But the room did. Not verbally, but in the way it watched, listened, held its breath. Every shadow seemed to lean in. Every corner felt closer than it was. The afternoon sun had dipped lower, casting long, eerie shapes across Michael's face, shapes that made his silence look even more haunting. Marlon finally whispered, That note, it felt weird, like the air changed. He wasn't wrong. The atmosphere had changed. The walls, the floor, even our bodies felt heavier, as if the note had disturbed something in the room that couldn't be put back the way it was. And through all of this, Michael's silence grew louder, not chaotic, not panicked, just echoing. He tugged lightly at my sleeve, his way of asking what comes next. And for the first time in years of rehearsing, performing, fighting, and pushing forward together, I didn't know. I had no map, no direction, only instinct. And instinct was telling me something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't going away on its own. And whatever had happened to Michael, we were only seeing the beginning of it. I placed my hand gently on his back. "Let's take a break," I said, "just a small one." But inside, my thoughts were anything but calm, because a voice as powerful as Michael's doesn't simply disappear, it gets taken, interrupted, claimed by something unseen, and I intended to find out what. I guided Michael toward the far wall, the one place in that cramped rehearsal room where the shadows gathered thickest. I didn't want the others to see the fear in his face, not because it made him look weak, but because it made them look scared. And fear spreads fast in a group like ours, faster than doubt, faster than truth. The room behind us murmured with uneasy shifting. Tito set his guitar down carefully, like it might shatter the delicate balance in the air. Jermaine sank onto a folding chair, elbows digging into his knees as he pressed his palms against his forehead. Marlon wrapped his arms around himself, rubbing his sleeves like he was trying to stay warm in a place that suddenly felt too cold. But I kept my focus on Michael. His silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. His breathing stayed shallow, irregular, as if he were rationing air. The shadows flickered across his face, turning his expression into something fractured, half calm, half terrified, and entirely unfamiliar to me. His voice was gone, not broken, not cracked. Gone, like someone had pressed a hand over it from the inside. "Hey," I whispered gently, kneeling so I was level with him. "Try again, not singing, just a word, any word." His brows knitted, he opened his mouth. A breath escaped, but no sound. He tried again. And again. Each attempt looked like it physically hurt. Less in his throat, more in his heart. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with a frustration so deep it made my chest tighten. "Easy," I said quickly, touching his shoulder. "Don't force it." But he wanted to force it. His entire body leaned forward with a determination that usually made him unstoppable. This time it just made him crumble. A small, shuddering exhale left him, and he pressed both hands to his throat, shaking his head in tiny, desperate motions. The others watched in silence, and that silence felt like judgment, even though it wasn't meant to be. "Jackie," Tito started, voice thin. "Is he?" "Don't." My answer came out sharper than I intended. He stopped immediately. Michael tugged at my sleeve then, and when I looked at him, his expression wasn't scared anymore. It was apologetic, like he had done something wrong, like losing his voice was somehow his fault. That look hit me harder than any note he had ever sung. "You didn't mess up," I told him firmly. "Do you hear me? You didn't mess up anything." He lowered his eyes, unable to accept the words. That was the part that tore at me, the quiet guilt. It clung to him like dust on the rehearsal floor, refusing to be brushed off. Michael might have been 9, but he carried expectations that felt like they belonged to a grown man. Maybe we'd put them on him. Maybe he'd pick them up himself. Maybe both. I drew in a breath, steadying my own voice because someone had to sound steady. "All right," I said softly. "One more try. Just a humming sound, a small one." He nodded. Tito leaned forward. Jermaine lifted his head. Marlon held his breath. Michael closed his eyes. His lashes quivered. His chest expanded slowly, then nothing, not even a vibration. His face tightened with effort, but it didn't matter. His voice wasn't just refusing, it was locked away, unreachable, like a door slammed shut without warning. A shiver crawled up my spine. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't overuse. This was something else, something that didn't belong in a simple rehearsal room. Michael's hands dropped from his throat. His entire posture sagged. His small frame folded inward, shrinking beneath the weight of his own fear. And watching him turn smaller, made something fierce ignite inside me. I reached out, pulling him into a quick, tight embrace. His fingers gripped my shirt with a desperation he tried to hide. His body was trembling ever so slightly, like a whisper running through his bones. "It's okay, Mike," I murmured. "We'll figure it out, I promise you." But even as I said it, doubts twisted inside me. What if we couldn't figure it out? What if this silence wasn't just temporary? The thought dug into my mind like a hook, refusing to let go. Behind me, the others exchanged looks, not panic, but something close to dread. Jermaine finally stood up and walked over. "Let him rest," he said quietly, though his voice shook. "Maybe he just needs time." Time, such a simple word, such an uncertain cure. Michael pulled back from me slowly. His eyes searched mine with a pleading question. When will my voice come back? And the worst part was, I had no answer. I forced a calm smile. "Let's step outside for a minute," I suggested, hoping fresh air might offer comfort if not solutions. But as I guided him toward the door, something stopped me mid-step. A thought. Sharp. Cold. Unwelcome. The note he sang before losing his voice. That impossible, electrifying, room-freezing note. It wasn't normal. Something inside me had known that from the moment it rang out. It felt too strong for his small frame. Too precise. Too heavy. Almost like it had taken something from him when it left. As if the note had been the last sound he could give, until something shifted in him again. Michael tugged at my hand gently, snapping me out of the thought. His eyes were tired. Too tired. Far too tired for a child who had lost only a note. But he hadn't lost a note, he had lost his voice. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't a pause in the story. It was the cliff we were all standing on, with no idea what was waiting below. The house was darker than usual when we returned home. Maybe it was just my imagination, but every shadow felt heavier, like it had been waiting for us. Michael walked beside me, clutching my sleeve, his steps small and spirit smaller. Every now and then he tried to clear his throat, hoping for a spark of sound, but nothing came out, only a thin, breathy whisper that faded before reaching my ears. Wordlessly, we stepped into the living room. The air held a stillness that didn't feel natural, too quiet even for our neighborhood, too still even for our creaking old house. I guided Michael to the couch, and he sank into it like someone twice his age. He pulled his knees close, palms on his throat as though afraid that if he let go, his voice would slip further away. Jermaine and Tito hovered by the doorway, unsure whether to come close or keep their distance. Marlon sat on the armchair, twisting his hands, eyes darting between the floor and Michael. None of us spoke. Speaking felt like tempting fate. We waited. For what, I didn't know. But some instinct told me something was coming. Then the front door opened with a soft, hesitant creak. A familiar figure stepped in. Mr. Collins, a family friend who had coached young singers around Gary for years. His presence carried an odd mixture of comfort and unease. He wasn't someone we called unless something serious was happening, and seeing him standing there, framed in the doorway's dim light, confirmed what I already feared. Someone had told him. Someone thought Michael's condition wasn't just exhaustion. He took off his hat slowly, like walking into a place of mourning. His gaze lingered on each of us before landing on Michael, silent, still, and trembling. "I heard what happened," he said softly. His voice echoed in the quiet like a stone dropped into deep water. Michael looked up, startled. His eyes widened in recognition, relief, and a hint of fear. Fear that this grown-up would confirm everything he was terrified of. Mr. Collins approached him, kneeling just as I had earlier during rehearsal. "Let me take a look, son." He reached out gently, fingers brushing along the sides of Michael's throat. Not roughly, but with the concern of someone who'd seen too many young voices strain under pressure they weren't ready for. "He pushed too hard?" he asked us. Jermaine stiffened. Tito looked away. I stepped forward. He hit the high note, and then nothing. Mr. Collins nodded like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. "This happens," he murmured, though his tone carried layers beneath the reassurance. "Young singers, especially those with talent like his, they sometimes overextend. Voice shuts down, just needs rest." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "But the way you boys described it, that note he sang, how'd it sound?" I hesitated. The memory replayed in my mind like slow-motion film, the brilliance, the sharpness, the unnatural weight of the sound before it collapsed into silence. "It froze the room," Jermaine whispered, like time stopped. Mr. Collins's expression changed, just barely, but enough for me to notice. A flicker, a tightening around the eyes, a thought he didn't want to voice, and that flicker made my stomach sink. He cleared his throat. "Well, sometimes folks talk. There's this old rumor," he said the word carefully, clearly marking it as only a rumor, "that when a kid's voice is unusually strong, stronger than their body's ready for, they might hit what some call a too powerful note, a note that demands more from the throat than it can give back." He let the words settle. "It's just talk," he added quickly. "Stories, nothing more." But the air shifted, the shadows reacted, and something inside me whispered that this wasn't just a bedtime legend. "What happens," I asked quietly, "if someone hits that kind of note?" Mr. Collins exhaled. "Most times, nothing permanent. Voice goes quiet for a while, needs rest, it returns." "And the other times?" I pressed. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Michael, looked through him, almost, as though searching for signs only he could interpret. "On rare occasions," he said slowly, "it can take a bit longer to come back. The shock of the note can make the muscles lock up, scare them into retreat, like a sudden freeze." A freeze. The word twisted inside my mind with unsettling familiarity. Michael shifted nervously, eyes darting between us. His silence wasn't empty, it radiated anxiety. He lifted a hand toward me again, a silent plea for clarity, for comfort, for answers he couldn't ask aloud. Mr. Collins softened his tone. "You'll be fine, son. Just rest. Don't try to push it." But I didn't miss the tightness in his jaw, or the way he avoided making promises, or the weight in his eyes that said he'd seen this before, and it hadn't always ended quickly. Michael tried to hum then, a soft test, a desperate attempt to find a crack in the wall surrounding his voice. Nothing, not even the smallest vibration. And that's when it happened, the moment that changed the room completely. Michael lowered his hands, lifted his head, and looked directly at each of us. His eyes weren't frightened anymore. They were determined, fierce even. Trembling, yes, but filled with a fire that didn't fit the fragile silence around him. It hit me like a blow. He wasn't scared of losing his voice. He was scared of letting us down. That realization struck harder than any rumor, any diagnosis, any shadow on the wall. The silence suddenly felt alive, breathing, watching. Behind us, the curtain leading to the hallway fluttered, though there was no draft. Mr. Collins stood slowly, troubled. "Let him rest tonight. We'll talk more tomorrow." But as he left, as the door clicked shut, I felt a chill roll across my spine. Because rest wouldn't fix this. Not the fear, not the pressure, not the strange electric weight that note had left behind. And certainly not the growing sense that something deeper was unfolding beneath our feet. Something we weren't prepared for. Something we couldn't ignore. The house felt different the following days, not quieter, not louder, but waiting. Like every wall was leaning in, listening for a sound none of us dared to predict. 3 days had passed since the room froze, since Michael's voice slipped into silence, since Mr. Collins' murmured words meant to reassure, but instead left us with invisible weights on our chests. 3 days, 72 hours, each one stretched, bent, and folded into the next. During that time, Michael barely spoke, not because he didn't try, but because trying only deepened the ache in his eyes. The smallest sound, an inhale, an exhale, a tightening of his throat as he attempted a hum, became an event, something we all subconsciously turned toward. But nothing came, and every time silence answered him, he withdrew a little more. I watched him constantly, too closely probably. His shoulders curled inward as though he was protecting something fragile. At night, he stayed awake longer than usual, sitting at the foot of his bed, his small fingers hovering over his throat, as if trying to remember the feeling of vibration. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for us, afraid of being the reason the dream we'd built might crack. But there was something he didn't know, something I realized watching him lose sleep. We weren't afraid of him failing. We were afraid of losing him. By the third afternoon, I found him alone in the living room, the winter light dripping through the blinds cut across him in narrow, trembling stripes. His legs dangled off the couch, swinging just slightly. In his lap sat a crumpled piece of paper, lyrics we'd worked on earlier in the week. His lips traced the words silently. He hadn't made a sound in days, not one. "Let's try again," I said softly, stepping into the room, stepping. Not demanding, not pushing, just inviting. Michael looked up slowly, eyes tired, but still burning with that strange, persistent determination. He took a breath, shaky, shallow, and nodded. I sat beside him. "Don't force it, just let it happen if it wants to." He closed his eyes, his fingers tightened around the lyrics. His chest lifted. A faint tremor passed through him. Fear or hope, I couldn't tell. Then, a sound, small, fragile. A breath wrapped in the thinnest thread of tone, barely there but unmistakably him. My eyes widened, Michael's lips parted again, and the thread grew slightly stronger, turning into a soft humming whisper. He startled himself. His eyes flew open, and then he smiled, just barely, but enough for the room to feel warmer. "Keep going," I whispered. "You're okay." He hummed again. Stronger this time, still quiet, still delicate, but with a growing confidence that made my heart pound. The others rushed in when they heard it. Tito from the hallway, Jermaine tripping over a shoe, Marlon skidding across the floor like he'd been sprinting. They froze at the doorway, afraid to interrupt whatever miracle was unfolding. Michael inhaled once more, and then, like something inside him finally unlocked, his voice returned, not all at once, but in a wave. A warm, trembling wave that rose from his chest, through his throat and into the room with a clarity that shattered the 3-day silence like glass. Jermaine gasped. Tito let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Marlon covered his mouth. I just stared, because his voice wasn't just back. It was different, stronger somehow, richer, more controlled, even with its shakiness. And as he tested a higher note, a small one, hesitant, his voice didn't break. It stretched, reached, pushed further than I expected, like it had been waiting on the other side of that silence, building itself for this moment. But the real shock came next. Without warning, Michael stood up. He looked at us, each one of us, his expression a mix of fear, defiance, and something deeper, something brave. Then he stepped into the center of the room, the same way he had in the rehearsal 3 days before, and he sang. Not loudly, not forcefully, but with a control that didn't belong to a child. Each note climbed higher, smoother, more confident. The sound wrapped around the room, not freezing it this time, but warming it, melting the dread that had been lingering like frost on our nerves. We didn't move, couldn't. His voice anchored us in place. Then he hit the final note, a high, clear, piercing one, and for the second time in days, the room froze, but not from fear, from awe. It wasn't the dangerous, unstable note he'd reached before. This was different, clean, steady, almost triumphant. Like he wasn't just reclaiming his voice, but rewriting the moment it had disappeared. The shadows didn't feel heavy anymore, the air didn't feel cold, and the fear that had curled beneath my ribs dissolved as I watched him lower the note gently, like placing something precious back into the world. He finished. Silence followed, but this silence felt peaceful. Michael turned toward me, his lips parted. "I'm okay," he whispered. The words were raspy, faint, but they were sound, his sound, and I couldn't help it. I grabbed his shoulders and pulled him into a hug. Jermaine wrapped his arms around both of us. Tito and Marlon joined in, forming a clumsy, shaking circle around the boy whose voice had vanished and returned like some quiet promise. In that moment, I realized something. The note that froze the room hadn't taken anything from him. It had tested him, and somehow, quietly, he had risen above it. But deep inside me, beneath the relief, a single uneasy thought remained. If one note had the power to silence him, what might the next one reveal?